Music to our ears. Well, each year, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, it's the custom of the club to invite a representative of one of the many societies and establishments with which Sir Walter was associated to join us at our annual dinner. Tonight, I'm delighted to welcome Mrs. Pauline Walker, the head teacher of the Royal High School in Edinburgh, Sir Walter's old school. The school was founded in 1128 as the seminary of Holyrood Abbey, and even after nearly 900 years, it can still boast high levels of academic achievement. Over the years, it's educated many students, as well as Sir Walter, who've distinguished themselves in pretty well every field of endeavour. After the Reformation, it passed from the control of the Abbey in 1566 to the Town Council of Edinburgh, and there it has stayed through all the succeeding bodies which have followed, and it's occupied several sites in the city. It has been settled in its present location in Barnton since 1968. This establishment is where Sir Walter Scott gained most of his formative education. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, would you please rise and raise your glasses for our toast to the Royal High School of Edinburgh. Do take your seats again. Mrs. Pauline Walker has been the rector of the Royal High School in Edinburgh since August 2014, arriving from 5 years as head teacher of Gracemount High School. She's a computer science honours graduate from Heriot Watt and a teacher of computer and maths, and she's a self-confessed geek with a passion for computing. She's married with 2 small boys, 3 and 7, which is why her husband can't be with us tonight, sadly, but perhaps on another occasion, and an array of animals, which includes 3 cats, a dog, and a very sparky horse called Minnie. As well as being passionate about computing, she's also passionate about education and firmly believes in ensuring every young person is fully supported to make the very best of their opportunities. So please give a very warm welcome to the rector of the Royal High School, Mrs. Pauline Walker, to respond to our toast.
Chairman, Bailey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be asked along this evening to join this absolutely fantastic gathering here celebrating Sir Walter Scott. Now, I do come from the Royal High School, which is a very, very old and very, very historical school, over 900 years. First starting 1128 in Holyrood Abbey. We've been very nomadic. We've had lots and lots of different places around the city, and we've had many eminent figures go through our doors. Now, that's something that I, as a rector, am aware of, we will have from our tutors, our pupils which are with us now. And we often say to our teachers, think of your day. Today, did you do well enough? Today you had sitting in your classrooms the Walter Scotts of tomorrow. Will they remember you, and will they remember your lesson? So I've come along this evening just to give you a little flavour of what happens in our school and how it might have looked for Sir Walter Scott. Now, I do share a similar trait to Sir Walter. He was lame, a little lame. I am myself, following a fall from a previous horse, not Minnie, who's my current midlife crisis. But I certainly am more comfortable in a horse than walking in heels, so he's a man after my own heart for that one, and I certainly, I can certainly see his way there. Now, he would have been in school in 1779 when we were currently placed at High School Yards, and the rector, and during his time, was Alexander Adam, and he's an eminent figure in education because he was about educational reform. And at the time when Walter Scott was at school, it could be a pretty nasty experience. Many of the young people there would sit day after day, daring not to breathe, making sure they learned their Latin off by prose, but certainly not learning an awful lot. And Rector Adam really made a difference for that. Today it's a very different school. We moved to the Barnton campus in 1968, and we not only became a state co-head in 1973, but we let the girls in. So it is very, very different. We do have many traditions remaining which would have been around in Walter Scott's time, including our gavel, which is now so old, in fact, it often flies off during assembly. Our memorial doors, which our young people leave from, not quite as dramatic as leaving from our previous doors up on the mound, but certainly as they leave from our hall into our car park in Barnton, it is a step forward to them into their next part of their life. Now, Walter Scott, the pupil, was not a studious scholar. He was prepared to accept some measure of responsibility for his academic shortcomings, and in fact he did say, "I was an incorrigibly idle imp, who was always longing to do something else other than what was enjoined him." So he may well have been spending quite a bit of time in my office. He's not unlike many of our pupils today. But today we do encourage them. Unfortunately, in Scott's time, the tawse, which was a thick back leather strap, was often seen in the classroom. That's been banished from today, and now we look to encourage our young people to really do their very, very best. But he did find a purpose to academia under the tutelage of Alexander Adam. It was a custom of the time that the rector taught, something I don't often get a chance to do these days. Most of the curricular leaders would not want me in their department, as they claim I'm often taken out to too many meetings, and the young people sigh with absolute non-glee if I am sent in to cover their class, I have to say. But however, in the time of Adam, the rector would take all the senior school, so he would teach the senior school, and he did teach Scott, and Scott wrote, "Nor shall I soon forget the swelling of my little pride when the rector pronounced, though many of my schoolfellows understood Latin better, Scott was behind few in following and enjoying the author's meaning." So he did find a passion for his education as a result of a good teacher. And that's something that we today are absolutely aware of. It's the teacher that makes the difference. And in actual fact, I know if I have a good teacher, I could put them in front of 100 students, give them no resources, and they will learn. Because that's the difference, is someone to instill that passion for learning in you. And in Adam, Scott found his purpose and his passion for learning. So we like to think we had a little bit to do with what he then did. Because he says, "Thus encouraged, I distinguished myself by some attempts at poetical versions from Horace and Virgil." So his first go at really making himself push his literary writing came from Adam's classes. Now the rector then noticed him. That's never a good thing, but he was noticed in that class as a result, and he gained some distinction. The rector took a real interest in Walter Scott, and as a result, he encouraged him and praised him to counterbalance his habits of indolence and inattention. Not unlike many of our former pupils, I have to say, who claim in many of their writings that they spent a lot of time in indolence. But in later life, as his fame grew, Dr. Adam did take a special interest in him and kept encouraging him through his later life. He often wrote to him, and they exchanged letters. And he wrote, "Dr. Adam, to whom I owed so much, never failed to remind me of my obligations when I made some figure in the literary world." So as with all great rectors, Dr. Adam encouraged him to be a better person and to really take on the role as an eminent person within the literary world. Something that we encourage our staff to do still today. Now, he attended the Royal High School during a time of great change, and Rector Adam faced absolutely venomous opposition to the changes he suggested. Something that we still do today, and currently in the flux of change in the Royal High School as we look to move ourselves into the next period of education. I don't think it's quite as much of a venomous opposition from the council or indeed my colleagues, and in fact Rector Adam came to blows with several over his suggestion that Greek should be introduced into the curriculum, and indeed he had to compromise and put it on a Saturday, much to the absolute dismay of his pupils. So while he pushed forward change, he did find opposition, but he did make a real difference to education. And ripples of what he did come right through to today. Today's educational world is very turbulent. We face issues of overwork, teacher shortage, changes to qualifications. Every new politician who comes along would like us to do something different. It can be very difficult to lead a school through a period of such turbulence, particularly when you've got the futures of young people in your hands. And it's a great responsibility for that. And Rector Adams would have found that with his pupils, including Scott. It's very difficult to think, what can I do which will encourage them for the future, which will make sure they have the very best educational provision, but will not mess it up. because at the end of the day, they only have one chance. And the young people we have sitting in our school today are in the middle of that one chance. So it's a great responsibility. Despite this, we do continue to prevail at the Royal High School. We continue to be an eminent school in Scottish education. We've kept that role within education now for our whole time, since 1128. We've come through lots of turbulence, including a murder back in the 1700s. I still, at the start of every new term, have to announce the school rules, which include no firearms, because at the time they felt that had to be stated following a lock-in by students, which resulted in the shooting of a master. We don't have quite such dramatic days now in the school, but we do encourage young people to have freedom of expression, and that comes with a chance and a risk. Okay, so we ask them to really push themselves out, and I firmly believe that we have to be the innovators of tomorrow, because if we're not allowing them to really go for it, to see how far they can push themselves, then how are they ever going to learn to take the risks, to take the steps, to be the big thinkers, to really put themselves out there and to make sure they do something really special when they do leave us. And we put support in place, something that Rector Adams was an innovator of in his time. Prior to that, young people who struggled or perhaps disengaged would be allowed to drift off, or in fact to face the TOS. They had a habit of moving you further back in the class. You started from the ducks, and the further back you were, the less likely you were to succeed. And the rector would often not make it to the back of the class throughout a whole day, and instead you would be tutored with some of the other students. We don't do that today. We support our young people, we scaffold those who need it. We are there to catch them when they fall, not to cotton wool them, not to make sure that they don't become resilient young people, but to make sure that they have the opportunity to succeed. We're there when they need it. And that's something I think that Rector Adam really put forward way back in Scott's time. We embrace ICT. I am a geek, I admit that. And as a result, I'm able to be really innovative with our school and embrace what we really need to do in terms of IT. So the whole of our senior school have iPads, which they use in all their classes, they take home with them, and they use to make very best use of what's out there today. So if they're studying Literature Works, they don't have to rely on us having copies of everything they possibly need. They can go online, they can find out what they need, they can read texts that we may not be able to produce for them. And it's really opened up our curriculum because it's enabled them to make choices about where their learning goes. And they can follow, I suppose, their dreams every day and see, well, what do I want to learn today? How do I want to learn it? Where do I want to study? And it's opened up a global perspective to learning that we couldn't do without the IT. And that's something that's been very, very exciting. Now, Scott embraced what we are attempting to instill in our young people, is resilience to challenge and change. You need it today. Okay, it's this tough old world out there, and we're aware that we're sending our young people out into an increasingly challenging world. Not least because of the global perspective, but because jobs are harder to come by, graduate unemployment is up, and it can be really tough to get your first start out there in the world. Many of you will have stories from your past, from going to university and on into eminent professions, to leaving at 15 and making your way there. It is tougher now, and we need to make sure that they are resilient, that they're able to then meet that challenge. And although Scott was primarily remembered for his extensive literary works, and we heard all about some of those today, really, really fantastic literary works, which we will always remember. And I was asked tonight, do you think he will be forgotten? Do you think we'll stop reading Walter Scott? And I don't, because we have societies such as you who are able to take that forward. We have the Royal High School where we celebrate what he does. We have a number of memorials to Walter Scott. He's not forgotten. The boys of 1932 gifted us a fantastic plaque, which is on the wall just before our assembly hall. We pass it all the time. Now, you pass it all the time, you may forget about it. So every year, our new first years are taken along to see it. And we explain why it's important. We talk about Walter Scott. And then we engage them in some of the works within English to let them see that's something that was really important for them. But he was not just a literist. He was also an advocate, a judge, a legal administrator. He did lots. And that's what we want our young people to do. We want them to be resilient to change, resilient to challenge, and able to sort themselves out when it goes a bit wrong. He did face a number of personal challenges, and actually it was fascinating studying up for coming today because I was able to see his story, and his life story was full of ups and downs, a lot of downs, which he climbed himself back out of. I really wish I could bottle the resilience that he had, that determination to succeed and that determination to get it right in life, even right up to the end when he was determined he would pay off those debts. What a fantastic, fantastic man. So if he was with us today, would he be one of my stars, or would he be one of my naughty boys? He would probably be shocked at the introduction of our young ladies, and he probably would be shocked at some of the skirts they consider uniform today. I'm quite often shocked by some of the skirts they consider uniform today. But he would be able to embrace the opportunity to explore his passions, including lots of opportunities to put his literacy and oratory skills to good use. We embrace debating, and in fact 2 of our young people are in the national finals in the next couple of weeks. We have writing competitions, both local and national, and have been hugely successful. We have media, which I think Scott may well have enjoyed. A different way to express themselves, perhaps drama may have been in there as well. We have a fantastic outdoor classroom. We are a very, very lucky school. We've got fantastic grounds. They're full of little nooks and crannies, woods, cliffs, rocks, and some of those we have now made into a very special area where young people can go out and engage with outdoors. Now you might think that's not a big deal, but many of our young people don't engage with the outdoors now. They're more often to be found inside with their tablets or their phones, or engaging with each other through text. I quite often see in the lunch area children speaking to each other by their phone across the table. It's a fact of life now. So we need to bridge the gap to show them that the great outdoors is there and what they can do with it and why it's important. So right now we have a fantastic, what I call the fairy tree, but they've told me I have to come up with a better name, but we have a giant tree, which in fact would have been there well before we moved in 1968. And it's under which we now have a series of logs where you can sit and you can consider your writing, you can think, you can dream. And in fact we had the official opening the other week, and there are days when being a rector can be quite strange, and I did think as I was following our pipe band in the dark, they were dressed in glow sticks up through the woods and into our fairy tree, which was bedecked in fairy lights. Now that was one of those, but however it really made my heart soar, because out there were our young people who were telling me about what they would like to write and what they would like to do in that area. Some thought about music, others thought about literature, others just wanted to be there. And it's about really finding that hook now in education to really explore your passion. And I think Scott would have really enjoyed that about school. There are opportunities for all. It doesn't matter if you are an absolute academic star or a ne'er-do-well. There's something for you in the Royal House School. And we will make sure that you find your right pathway to success by being there and changing your options and looking to see what you may want to do. So the days of Latin, and yet more Latin are well and truly gone. Now that may be a shame, we've lost the language, it's no longer taught in the state schools in Scotland. But we do have a really vast curriculum in place now. Our young people may spend only part of their week in school. They may study with us, but also study out on a work experience placement at the same time. Some attend university to do some of the units that they need for first year during their final years with us. They go out and they volunteer, they engage with the community. They do lots to ensure that when they leave us, they have everything they could possibly need to make their very positive step out into the world of work. Because after all, they've got to pay our pensions, so we need them to do well. We are absolutely honoured to be associated with such a great literary figure. Sir Walter Scott features heavily around our school, as I've said, and we remember him every year. When I take assembly, I have a fantastic gavel, and behind me is a bust of Scott. And he's there watching over us, seeing exactly what it is that we're up to. And I like to think that all our eminent figures are somewhere out there thinking about what are we doing in our school today. He was an inspirational figure. His works are still studied by pupils. I'm really pleased to see the introduction of Scottish literature back into the English curriculum in school. It's become a compulsory module for all. And that has enabled us to bring back into many of the Scottish literary works that had been disappearing from our curriculum, which is so chock full of all the modern writings. So it's really good to see him coming back in. He may well have spent quite a bit of time in my office for his indolence and inattention, but it would have been a real pleasure to teach him. I quite often have the naughty boys, and I have to say, I think many of them are going to be okay, because when they're in having a chat with me, they know where they're going, they just need to get it right in the classroom. Now, Alexander Adams, who was Scotch rector, was absolutely passionate about the pupils he taught. And his last words on his deathbed were, in fact, "It grows dark, boys, you may go." So he thought of them right to the end. I hope that's not me to say, but it was the done thing in those days to die in post. So I'm certainly hoping not to follow that area of his legacy. But under his tutelage, boys flourished, they grew in confidence, and I'd like to think that the Royal High School played an integral part in allowing Sir Walter Scott to go forward and be the eminently successful figure that he was. So we are proud to be associated with Sir Walter Scott. We're proud of what we have in the Royal High School today, and we hope there are some new Sir Walter Scott sitting in our classrooms today, and that we are allowing them the confidence, the passion, and the ability to explore what they really want to do, which will mean in 100 years' time, someone may be sitting thinking about them. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Pauline. That was marvellous. I could see from your passion and your enthusiasm exactly why you're the rector of the Royal High School. And I think Sir Walter would have been jolly lucky if he'd had you as the rector and been made to stand on the mat. So thank you again for coming to the dinner and for giving us that insight into modern education in Sir Walter's old school. Now, to round off our dinner by proposing a vote of thanks, I'd like to invite a lover of fine books who parted with a set of first edition of Scott's novels last year, from which the club also benefited thanks to his generosity. The date of our dinner usually clashes with the Edinburgh Book Fair, which prevents him from coming to the dinner, but this year he is here, so it gives me great pleasure to ask bookseller without equal Alan Grant to round off our evening. Alan.
One of my boys, can everybody hear me all right? Yes. Oh, it's speaking very well, yeah. Okay. Well, Alistair invited me to offer the club's thanks to our speakers this evening. He suggested I like to tell you something first about my dealing with Walter Scott's works. I've been an antiquarian bookseller for 40 years, nearly. I bought and sold everything he ever published. But I don't want to keep you fascinated for too long, so I'll just mention a couple of things that were out of the ordinary. Of the Waverleys I've had, almost part of a set of first edition novels that belonged to the solicitor John Richardson, one of Scott's closest personal friends. Richardson guessed that Scott was the author on his first reading of Waverley. Excuse me for being breathless. And when he confronted his friend, Scott couldn't deny it. Richardson thus became one of the select few to be in on the secret of authorship early. 13 novels in the set contained presentation inscriptions from the publishers. These are the only sort of presentation copies one can find of Scott's novels, because Scott inscribed none himself. My other complete set of first editions was a very handsome set from the Hersal, home of the Hume family by Coldstream. That said, had been in Massachusetts since the 1960s, but is now safely housed within a very few miles of coasting by a prominent member of our club. Now, skipping the middle one, about 1990, I bought the first edition Minstrelsy of the Scottish Border from Phillips in Edinburgh. Phillips when they were auctioneers in Edinburgh. It was attractively bound in green straight grey Morocco and contained an intriguing inscription. The letters CLD intertwined in violet ink. The violet ink was the great clue, characteristic of a writer quite as famous as Scott himself. The letters CLD stand for Charles Lopage. Really better. Charles Lopage Dodgson, better known as Lewis Carroll. Dodgson was a Scott admirer, and one of his first juvenile efforts was an invitation from the Lady of the Lake, published in the Whitby Gazette in August 1854. The Sagadee had drunk his fill, where stands the moon on Monadrill, becomes the youth that he had drunk his fill, where stands the pub on Abbey Hill, or some such thing. So they were all pretty exciting to deal with, as were many of us. And I hope I'm not done yet. But now all that remains for me is to join me in that vote of thanks to our speakers this evening. They've made very valuable contribution, including of course our president himself, Jerry Crowell, Mary Aikman, and to Eileen from Pauline from the Royal High School. So please, in the usual manner, join me in thanking them.
Well, Alan, many thanks. And, ladies and gentlemen, I think Alan's vote of thanks brings our evening to a beautifully rounded close. I do look forward to seeing you at our many talks throughout the rest of the year. Our first talk following this annual dinner will be on Thursday the 7th of April, and will be given by Lara Haggerty, the manager and keeper of the books at the beautiful Inverkeithry Library near Crieff, which some of you may well have visited. Lara will be talking about the history of this fascinating institution. And then next, on the 5th of May, we'll be holding our annual general meeting at 7 o'clock here, followed by a talk by Dr. Susan Oliver about Sir Walter's interest in the countryside. Dr. Oliver is an academic at the University of Essex who has a long-standing interest in Sir Walter's environmentalism. And our final talk during the first half of 2016, on the 16th of June, will be a talk by Professor Murray Pittock from the University of Glasgow on Sir Walter Scott's attitude to the Enlightenment, another intriguing topic which we'll explore by using Sir Walter Scott's novel Rob Roy as a starting point. There will be more talks to follow later in the year, including a visit to Abbotsford on the 7th of August, and I hope that you will all be able to enjoy them. But for this evening, thank you all very much for coming. I hope you've enjoyed your dinner, and have a safe journey home.